Everyone says how horrible it will be to renovate or build your house. We're here to say it doesn't have to be that way. Join 3 seasoned architects as they interview homeowners who recently completed a large project and ask them one simple question. What do you know now that you wish you knew before you started? Welcome to Home, the Second Story podcast.
Hi, and welcome to a snack size episode of Home, the Second Story. I'm Marilyn from Lancaster, Pennsylvania and Boston, Massachusetts, along with...
I'm Sherry from Cincinnati.
And I'm Taylor from Birmingham.
Let's dive in. We're talking about the selections process, aka choosing all of your fixtures, finishes, colors, materials, all that stuff. The process of it.
Right. And it is a process.
It is a process.
Yeah, well, I think that's the main crux of part of our service is that we guide people through that entire process. And it is a service. It's so time consuming, and there's so many hours and so many decisions to make. Decision fatigue is real. By even the middle of the project, it's just too much. So I don't really know where to start. It's hard for me from on the inside to start, like where is the beginning of this whole selections process? And it's really during preliminary design. We start thinking about all of the things that we need to choose. But one of you, I think it was Taylor, has taught me the entire process is a game of refinement. You start big and broad, and you just keep niching down into the details.
Yeah.
And for true custom homes, and we can probably do a whole nother snack episode on what is a custom home versus semi-custom versus luxury, all of that. But in a true custom home, the homeowner literally makes the decision on every single thing, every single finish that goes into the house.
So I'll give a quick anecdote. Y'all know I like stories. I was sitting last week having a glass of wine with some friends, and a dear friend who did not use me for her project. And that's fine. I'm okay with that.
It's fine.
That's absolutely fine.
It is fine.
Was bemoaning that they hadn't moved into the house after they had been working on their renovations. And one of the things they were talking about is how they struggled with making decisions. And they had talked to some other friends who were clients, and the clients had of mine and related to them that, they were almost done making all the decisions. And so before construction had even started. So I think from a process perspective, the goal is to have all of that done, regardless of in what phase you're making it, to get it done before you break ground is really the most ideal. If you're going to put like a hard line, that's generally the right time to do it.
Yes.
That's the best line I can draw. And then the process is going to vary from client to client. Like some clients are going to want to go with you to 12 different showrooms. Other places want us to go to 12 different showrooms, narrow it down to 4 or 5 selections and present it to them, whether that's windows or tile or faucets or whatever it is. So some of it is the temperament of the client, whether they're easily overwhelmed and don't want to do that stuff, whether it completely freaks them out, which is absolutely normal, or whether they're really decisive and have a really clear picture in their head of what they want.
Yeah, I think, the thing there that I'm like jumping up and down cheering for is get it done before construction starts. So there's this myth that like, just quickly get a permit set out the door, get it under construction as fast as you can. And then later you'll have time to pick out the tile and pick out the fixtures and pick out everything. Disaster. That is a disaster. So I think where that comes from, at least in my experience, is more production builders, where you can do that because they're saying, pick from one of these 3 tiles, pick from one of these 2 faucets, and you pick one or the other that will already behind the scenes work with whatever they've got. But if you're doing something custom, you have to know what it is, because the guys are coming in, the contractors coming in, they're going to start rough-ins very early in the process. They need to know where the sconces go on the wall next to the mirror above the the vanity. And if you don't know what the vanity is, what the mirror is, what the tile is, what the sconce is, you can't tell them where to put the electrical box, which they need to know very early in the process. And I think that to me is like, there's this, it's one of the biggest things that seems to be this sort of myth that's around, that like once you start construction, you have oodles of time. And it's just not a good idea. Just figure it out ahead of time. Why would you leave that to chance?
I 100% agree with both of you that that is the ideal. I will say in my practice, 90% of the time we are breaking ground and then diving into selections. And I do not think that is the best solution. So in that case, in our case, in most of our projects, we have to be very purposeful in what we select and what we don't go back and change our mind about. Because of that reason, you know, if we're making lighting decisions before the electrician comes and pulls wires, you're not going back and changing that based on something else you choose later down the line. And that's one of the reasons why it's best to do it all in the beginning, all at once, instead of fast tracking, which is choosing and passing it off, choosing and passing it off. It makes the process much harder. We do make it work, and we do end up with beautiful projects, but it is not the best process.
Well, I think also part of the reason why I'm especially allergic to that way of doing things is because I do a lot of renovations. And renovations, you are at the rough-in stage within like 2 weeks of starting the project.
Oh, interesting. Yes. Because we have the whole foundation, framing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, yeah, Sherry, when you said that, I was like, oh, right. So because you've got all the site work and utilities and you're digging foundations. I mean, you have months and months potentially.
Correct.
I've got like a couple weeks. So we go in there, we demo, even if it's down to the studs, we demo, and they're in framing and rough-ins like almost immediately.
Right away.
So
interesting.
Yeah. And so also with renovations, your hands are a lot more tied because, and especially the kind of renovations we do super complex, super like old, weird houses with very little, I mean, it's all this historic stuff and and we're trying to do something modern in a historic building. So we're trying to do all this stuff and it's really, really complicated. So I think that's probably why I was like, oh my God, no. Because obviously for us doing those renovations, you're in that stage very much, much faster than if you're in a ground up. But like you said, you should still do it for ground up, but you do have a little bit more time.
Well, you should do it for ground up, but I also think there is some wiggle room. You know, like there could be a scenario where you're doing an addition or a renovation and there's an underground thing that causes you to have to dig deeper foundations and you need to go back and revisit some of those selections based on costs. I mean, that happens pretty frequently too. So I wouldn't call it like the most hard and fast rule. And there's certainly, you know, opportunities to change your mind and things that you can do. In an ideal world, that's where we would be with renovations and additions for sure too. Even the additions sort of straddles that ground between new construction and renovations. So I think timeline, like that's probably the most ideal way to do it, but it doesn't mean that it can't work other ways. It just may cause some other challenges or put some other you know, conditions on your selections if you aren't doing it until a certain point. I also want to hear about y'all's, like, how do you go about that with clients? Like I've said, we offer them lots of different options based on what their tolerance for decision-making is or tolerance for being overwhelmed with X. How do y'all go about that process too?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's about their tolerance for making decisions or their ability to their interest in making decisions.
Yeah.
And part of what I feel like one of my biggest jobs as a custom residential architect on these projects who offers full interior design is to get to know my client well enough to know what they're going to really care about and what they're going to want to be down in the weeds about and what they're like, look, I just don't care. Just give me 2 options and I'll just pick one because it's fine. And that varies from client to client. So I think, you know, some clients get really in the weeds about the cabinetry and some are way in there about tile or whatever. So I think number one is knowing the owner from the architect standpoint. But I also want to say, like, I have this piece that I wrote that's part of one of my packets, my residential workbook packet that I have. One of the worksheets is trying to figure out your decision-making style as an owner. So I think that's also really important is for us to help coach people on how to make these decisions based on what kind of decision maker they are. And that becomes really interesting when it's a couple, because one member of the couple may feel, this happens a lot, where one member of the couple feels better after the decision is made. So they just like, yeah, fine. That one, just pick that one. I'm done. And the other one feels more comfortable kind of, well, I don't know. I want to think about it some more. I'm not ready to make the decision. And that's two opposite decision-making styles. And opposites attract. And it's great to have partners who are your complement. But when it's time to make a decision, then that can be a point of conflict. So I think knowing yourself as an owner as you go into it is also really important too. And we're there to help coach people.
Another type of decision maker that we have right now is they want to see everything all together for every single decision.
Boy.
We have set up a corner of our office just to lay everything out, because any decision that we make along the line, they want to see every decision we've already made, which it's been a lesson for me because it really does help and it's nice. And we may carry that on for our next clients. We're always willing to learn from our clients. So speaking of process, I'm sure we all have, little rules that we live by for process. And one of my rules for my clients is we always start with natural materials. So if they have natural stone, natural wood, we start with those because those are limited options. You have limited option of stone that's going to work on the exterior of our building in our climate. We start with that and then build from there. I think on a lot of projects where you see, and it's just like everything doesn't quite hang together, it's probably because they just picked their favorite things and didn't have a process to select those and to build on an idea. Do you guys have a process?
Well, I just want to add the opposite side of that, because agreed, pick the things that have the least number of available choices to you. And the opposite side of that is like leave paint color till the end.
Yes, 100%.
There are infinite paint colors. We will find the paint color. Do not show up with a chip of paint, a paint sample, and say, I need to find the tile that matches this.
Right.
No. Do it the opposite way. Find the tile and we can match any paint in the world. So take the pressure off yourself, folks, for paint. So that would be the opposite of that, right? Like leave paint to the end because you can get it to match anything.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Also on process, let's talk a little bit about how all of that data gets organized and who organizes it and who hands it off to whom.
That is a process that can be cumbersome. And the bigger your project is, the more bits and pieces go into that information bucket. And there's an internal process for us to handle it, but then there's the external handing off process that's associated with it too. So it's not just do you have that email that said that I really liked that faucet? I mean, we do operate that way, but that's a really rough way to sort of have to organize everything. So I am kind of old school. So we keep a binder of all of the cut sheets and the selections and the notes from our site visits. And we use that during the construction documentation process too. It's something that we can go back and refer to see if there are specific installation requirements or ventilation requirements or whatever that is that we're going to need. And so keeping that hard copy, I can't sort through multi-page PDFs and get an effective answer. So we keep that binder. And then in order to transmit that material to the person who is pricing and building, we have kind of a double process that we hope is the thing that finds the mistakes. So we have a schedule that we generate and a schedule is really just a list. Like if you look at a set of drawings, it'll say fixture schedule. And most drawings you'll see, it's like a spreadsheet. And it shows, it's got all the different columns for whatever that type of selection is. It may have the model number, the color, the finish, all of those things are in that schedule. And once that schedule goes on the drawings, that's our understanding of what those pieces are. the owner gets to see those and confirm them. But then we also generate schedules from our vendors. So if we are going to our plumbing supplier, they're generating a schedule too. And we can cross-check that to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the builder is getting both of those documents, and we're sort of helping sort through if, they said they wanted polished nickel and it shows up in chrome, we can make sure that we've got sort of all of those things aligned. There's lots of different pieces, and we want to double check all the time to make sure. That doesn't say we don't make mistakes, but we try and incorporate a process, and I think all of us do this, that minimizes what the opportunities for those errors are.
Yeah, for sure. I have a huge Google Sheet, basically a Google Sheets document that I share with the owners. And we use that to track absolutely everything in there, down to the shower hardware, down to everything. And there's a little column that says yes, no, or it's just blank. And that's where the owner can say yes or no. And we use that to structure our meetings. We use that to remind everyone, and they have access to it all the time. So when they're sitting there Tuesday at 10 o'clock and they're sitting there going, wait, what did we pick for that bathroom? They can go into that and look. Now, at the top, and this is crucial, at the top, there's a big green box that when it goes, well, it's white until it goes green. When we turn it green, that means this schedule has been superseded and is now in the drawings, because we don't keep it updated in both places. So once the Google Sheet is like approved and everything, then we take all of that and put it into our drawings. Then the drawings become the document of record, and the Google Sheet has been superseded, and the drawings become the law. The good thing about the Google Sheet is by the time that all the stuff is moved from the Google Sheet to the drawings, the owner sees it in the drawings. They're like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. Everything is familiar. Everything is fine. They've had their hands on everything and approved everything. That is a nice point for us as practitioners to get everyone's buy-in, get everything organized, and then move into the drawings that need to communicate things to the builder. And I think that's really actually incredibly important, because you cannot go on the like text chain of like, can we change that faucet from this one to that one? It needs to be highly, we're doing projects with, 6 or 8 bathrooms. Like you can't, and we have 10 projects going on at once. Like we need to keep on top of that.
Yes.
Right.
And so that's how we do it.
Great. I've learned something from each of you. To build on that, we also have sign-offs.
Yes.
So when we finish, before, we work hand in hand with the builder, and before the builder orders the final, the whole plumbing order, we sign off on it, and then we have our clients sign off on it also. Sometimes they don't ever look at it because they trust us. And I always tell them, please look at it, because like Taylor said, we do still make mistakes. And, they're the ones that know, that have their heart into it. So we have everybody sign off on it before final orders go.
And that, I just want to say, is like a tried and true way of doing architecture. It's in sort of more formal jobs, it's called submittals or things like that. And it just boils down to checks and balances. And I think, we've covered a lot of ground today from like how to make decisions. I think we should do another snack on how to actually make decisions. I think that's a whole interesting topic. Good idea. I think it also boils down to making sure, and this is my message to homeowners, making sure that your team, whether it's your designer, your architect, if you have one, your builder, has a disciplined process for tracking this stuff. Because if they don't, and if it's a bunch of little notes on Post-it notes and texts and scraps of paper,
please don't text us with your hardware changes.
Yes,
that is a email. That is my note to everyone. And on Saturday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, I very much appreciate your thought process, but it is not going to make it into the drawing set.
That's funny. Marilyn, you mentioned your workbook that you made. You want to tell us and our listeners where they can find that?
Yeah, so it's runcibleshop.com, and I have all sorts of downloadable resources. And one of them is this 50-page workbook where all these sort of worksheets and things like that. I just updated it and added a few new things. So yeah, I've got mini books on there and other resources and stuff. So yeah, go check it out. Thanks, Sherry.
Yes.
Sponsored
great.
by runcibleshop.com.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us today on Home the Second Story for a quick snack. Questions for us or topics you'd like us to cover or interested in being a guest? Reach out at admin@htssspodcast.com. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Home, the Second Story podcast. Feel free to share this episode with a friend. Contact information for all three of our architects are in our show notes. And don't miss future episodes. Follow or subscribe to our show for free in Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now.